We are live. Right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to my science journey. Today, we are honored to be hosting Professor Christian Happi, who will be sharing his science journey with us, as well as, opportunities, achievements, and challenges that he has faced in his career path. Feel free to ask any questions that you have for Prof in the chat, and then we'll get to you in a few. And we are happy to have all of you here with us. So please also feel free to let us know where you're joining us from. So your name and where you're joining us from today. So if you can type that in the chat box, we will appreciate that. And thank you so much, Prof, for being here with us. I think I would like to start by congratulating you first for being named, on the 100 most influential people by Times. So congratulations and continues, paving the way for the rest of us to follow the young scientists that look up to you like me. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
All right. So we'll get right into it. Today, I am joined by one of my teammates, who's Nehemiah, who will be helping with monitoring the YouTube channel. So again, if you have questions, type them as early as possible so that we can get to them while we still have time. So, Prof, just to start, before we get into the science, what do you enjoy doing to relax and recharge outside science?
I mean, there are two things I like doing to relax and recharge after science. I really love being with my family, my children, and that's the first thing I do.
Mm.
Try as much as possible to spend time with them. I'm a golf player, so and then I also enroll the whole family to play golf. So often, weekends we go, all of us, to play golf.
I
So
really love
from
being with my family, my children, and
the
that's the first thing I do.
the young
Try as
one, from the young one to the oldest one. So we go and play golf. That gives us the opportunity to talk, to bond, to compete a little bit, and then together with my wife and all that. And then I also do quite a lot of reading. I take time and read. Yeah.
Are there specific genres that you're interested in, or you just read broadly?
And I just read broadly, so I read broadly. I'm very interested in also learning from others, biographies, autobiographies.
Yeah.
I read that quite a bit, quite a lot, because I want to learn from other leaders to see their path. So, I mean, what life looks like for those. And I also read broad topics generally to get informed about things I don't know, other fields that are not really related to science.
Oh, that's good to learn. That's good to hear. So, as someone who's worked across multiple continents, I mean, from your bio, I know you've been, Africa, UK, US. What's one cultural insight that you think has unexpectedly enriched your career?
Well, I do think that it is clear that having worked in multiple places, you learn a lot. I mean, in terms of culture, but I mean, one thing that I definitely learned, for instance, is, I mean, a sense of what I would call real discipline. I think for me, I think having worked somewhat with the U.S. military, I mean, taught me a bit of discipline. I mean, when I say discipline, not that I wasn't disciplined, but it's absolutely the fact that no excuses, I mean, is accepted. So you got to meet the milestone, you got to meet. So that sense of discipline is something that really has enriched my career because, I mean, for those who work with me, they know I don't take excuses. So, and
Yeah.
I think it is one of those things that you see working with others. You take that out. I learned that a lot from the U.S. military, and then that was very, very enriching for me.
That's good to know that, discipline is very, very important. I know a lot of times we keep, with the notion that African time or African this and African
Right.
that. Yeah, so I think it's good that you actually brought that up. Right, so let's jump into your journey, Prof. Can you please share, how you got to where you are today, the Professor Christian Happy that all of us know about you? Just like a summary.
Well, I will say that first of all, I mean, becoming a professor wasn't a vision. So I think for me, I grew up, uh, I think somehow knowing a bit, I mean, having a bit of a sense of what I wanted to be. You know, I was born in Cameroon and I from a very humble background. And I did um I did have quite a bit of malaria going on. And this is basically just to share with you how, an event in life can shape your life. An event early on in your life can shape your future.
Yeah.
So I had one of the worst bouts of malaria when I was probably about 8 years. I remember vividly. My mom backed me up, took me to a hospital. It wasn't really a hospital, it was a dispensary. So where we have a Catholic nurse who took care of me. I mean, who were managing us. And I got an injection. Of course, I was so weak I couldn't walk. And then my mom was backing me on the way back. We got somewhere under a tree, and then she was tired. She wanted to rest. And then she put me down, and I was lying against a tree. And I remember asking her, why
Yeah.
am I this sick? Why am
Yeah.
I this sick?
Yeah.
And she told me, the doctor said that you had malaria. And I said, why is it the cure for
Mm,
this disease? That I can see that I get sick often.
mm,
And she told me that, well, unfortunately, I don't know. That's all she told me. She wasn't that educated. She just told me she doesn't know. And
mm,
I told her that, well, when I grow up, if this disease is still on, I will find a cure for it. That was really,
mm.
that was what I told her. And she tells this to my children. When she's with us, she said, "Look, your dad told me when he was 8 years that he was
Yeah.
probably doing what he's doing now."
Yeah.
So, and I grew up with that mindset that I was going to find a solution for malaria.
Yeah.
And later on, a few years later, when I got to high school, and then we were studying biology. And in
Mm,
our biology class, we were studying the DNA.
mm,
And studying the DNA, I remember the teacher told us that, oh, the DNA is a molecule of life. And I still have up to today that picture in my head, looking at Watson and Crick, very tall, James Watson and then James Crick were kind of small. Francis Crick, Francis Crick tall and James Watson small. So you could see, I mean, those pictures. And then these were the two people that discovered the structure of the DNA,
yeah.
and then they were biochemists. So when I saw that picture and I could connect at the time DNA and malaria, because I said that the molecule of life, because I remember asking this, so we were told that everything that lives has
Mm,
DNA. That's what the way we were explained this.
yeah.
And then you see the picture of those guys that discovered the DNA, and you know, and they were biochemists. So I
Yeah.
graduated from high school with flying color. Actually, I was the best student, in the whole
Wow.
province.
Yeah.
So, and in those days, graduating from biology, chemistry, math, and then that made me qualify to go to medical school. Actually, everybody knew I was going to the medical school.
Mm,
But I made a decision that shocked everybody, which was I decided not to go to medical school,
yeah.
but I decided to go to the university
Mm,
and chose biochemistry. And
mm,
people were like, what is wrong with this guy?
yeah.
Medical doctors in my time were highly respected, and everything. Go to medical school was a prestige. But
Yeah.
I said, no, I want to be a biochemist,
Mm,
because in my head, a biochemist discovered the DNA. The
yeah.
DNA is a molecule of life. I
Mhm.
want to find a solution to malaria. So if
Malaria.
I
Yeah.
can understand, yes, that's exactly what drove me,
Mm,
to get into research. I mean, right from the beginning, I was meant to be, I mean, I knew I was going into research. I didn't want to do anything else. And
mm,
I graduated in biochemistry and then looked for a program that
mhm.
was studying biochemistry, that was working on malaria, but trying to understand the biology of malaria. And that's exactly what drove me. I got into that program,
Mm,
and then started basically just trying to understand what malaria is. And that's how, through the research program and researching on malaria first in the early part of my career, I made some groundbreaking discoveries, in terms of understanding some markers and everything related to malaria parasite
mm,
before, shifting into some viral hemorrhagic fevers that were a problem. Yeah,
yeah.
I didn't find a cure for malaria, but I found a lot of solutions for malaria, understanding them and then discovering quite a number of things that help malaria and save a lot of life. So that's a bit of what brought me to a point where, okay, I joined academic because you
Yeah.
do research in academia, and then I evolved to become a professor and then a distinguished professor. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that, Prof. Like, I mean, it's interesting to learn about the power of manifestation and or, how you can turn your challenges actually into working something that can actually, contribute to science greatly like you have. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I know a lot of people, even me, when you're growing up and you ask, okay, what do you want to do? I want to be a doctor. And then when you go to campus or after high school, you're like, okay, let me just do science. At least it's closer to medicine. I can do that. But it's interesting to know that you actually had a choice, like you were supposed to go to medical school, but you still chose to do science instead. And you are, thinking about it and the contributions that you've made to science until today. It's enormous. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. So, while just going through your path and getting to where you are, and since we've talked about your contributions to the field of malaria, but I know most recently we had the COVID-19 pandemic, and your lab was you together with your lab were very critical in the sequencing of the SARS-CoV genome. Could you speak to us about that time and what you guys were, what was happening in the background? Because a lot of the things that we know or we hear are things that afterwards or after the aftermath of what happened. So maybe you could share a brief about what was happening during that time period for you guys to be able to,
Yeah.
the SARS-CoV genome in under 48 hours.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to say that, when COVID started in China in November, I mean, that information was not really available. So we heard about some mysterious disease happening in China. And then in January 2020, I was in New York, giving a TED talk.
Yeah.
And it was after I finished giving the TED talk in New York that I came out of the studio and I heard that that they've just reported the first cases of SARS-CoV-2 in
Mm,
California. And that for me was shocking because everybody was talking about it. Everybody was talking about this mysterious disease that has no cure, no solution. And I can tell you that the first thing that came to my mind was, I need to go back home. I need to go back to Africa.
mm,
And I was like, I got to go back because if this thing spread, we don't have solutions. We're
yeah.
all going to be dead. So I already packed my things. I changed my plans completely. And I
Mm,
told everybody I'm going back to Africa. And then at Harvard, they were like, why are you going? I said, no, I'm going home. And then like, why are you going? I mean, why suddenly the changing plan? I said, listen, this is going to spread.
yeah.
And we have to organize. We have to sit down and then think about how we want to do. You
Yeah.
need to know that we in Africa, we don't have the resources and things that you guys have here.
Yeah.
So if this thing come for us, we're all going to be gone. So we need to go back and organize. So I flew back and then got to my lab and then gathered everybody. I remember gathering all the graduate students and the postdocs, everyone in the lab. It was really not even like in the classroom, like
Mm,
a lab meeting. We
mm,
were all on the corridor in our lab. And I said, hey guys, times are tough. We are going to be facing one of the most top challenges that we would have seen in our lifetime.
mm,
And that is with this disease that is coming. We don't know how it's going to be, the outcome. I mean, but you need to understand that our own case in Africa will be different. We
yeah.
don't have all the resources. We don't have what it takes. But there is one thing that I'm very sure about is that we do have the brain power to
Yeah.
try to do things and work together, most of the courage and everything that we have in order to face this challenge. The
Yeah.
thing is that in my group, there were some people with who have gone through the storm of Ebola in 2014 together. So with that background, they've seen what we've done before. They've seen, how in the midst of a huge storm, we could actually use science, technology, and innovation
Mhm.
to counter a disease like Ebola. And I said, hey, listen, this is another big one.
Yeah.
This one might be even worse than Ebola. So we need to sit down and then think about. And then I said, hey, now we got to sit down and then as a team. And I said, now we have to sit down and decide exactly what we want to do.
Mm,
This is a time to make a decision. And I said, look, there are dangers associated with what I'm saying. We're all going to be here. I want us to sit down here and work together. We're all going to stick together. We're going to be one team, one people facing this storm. So
yeah.
if we have to go, we'll all go together. If you have to survive, we will survive together.
Yeah.
But I said, this is not forcing anyone in this team that is not willing to, face this pandemic with the risk and the
Mm-hmm.
challenges that is presented, please should go home. And
Mm-hmm.
anybody that want to sit down and then stick, and work can stay. The bottom line is we're either going to, make history together or we'll all perish together. This is really the language that I use with my team.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, look, anybody feel free. If you're not ready, you go home. That we're all going to be living here on this campus together. We're all going to be having breakfast, lunch, dinner together. So I was with them. So,
Mm-hmm.
and then I told them that and then we need to start putting our protocol and then see how we can accelerate things, accelerate processes, making a system such that when one set of people finish one step, the other one takes the other step. So to fasten processes so that
Yeah.
we can cut down in time. And because they all know that I've always said that to beat an epidemic, you need two things. One is the speed, the second is accuracy. Speed
Mm-hmm.
of execution is very important. We beat Ebola doing that, and I said we need to, go back to the same playbook.
Yeah.
And obviously, to my surprise, every damn person in my group signed up.
Oh,
Everybody,
wow. I mean, why would
male,
they not
female,
having leadership like, with working with someone like you, they would definitely, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
they all signed up, and they will now started working in different groups. They said, "Well, you guys are going to do, 8 to 12. You guys take from 12 to 12 to 4." So we created a lot of groups and then set up a rotation system
Yeah.
whereby we all knew we were covered 24 hours, overlapping
Wow.
one after the other. And then some group going to rest. We set up a plan where we actually had to invite and then book a company that was supposed to have breakfast, lunch, dinner. So
Oh,
we
wow.
move. I told guys, go home and then bring all your stuff. So and then I told the university, so students are going home.
Yeah.
We're going to take over one particular hostel. That is going to be our home. We're all going to be here, and this is where we'll be living.
Mm,
So and the university agreed, and then that's how we did. And we when South Africa, when Egypt had the first case,
yeah.
we knew that, oh, now we are going to face it because it's already in Africa.
Yeah.
Then a week later, South Africa reported its own case.
Yeah.
But at that point, they didn't know what to do, both Egypt and South Africa. And then maybe about 2 weeks later, then we had a call to say, well, there is a suspected case sometime somewhere in Lagos. So,
Mm,
and then the sample was sent to us, and we eventually, we actually unleashed what I call our magic recipe, and then within 48 hours, we had a genome, and then we
wow.
actually shared with NCDC and then shared with the rest of the world. And that was like a shockwave that went across the world because, like, how could these guys in Africa, do this in 48 hours when the rest of the world is struggling?
Yeah.
That was the real shockwave. And then the good thing is that with that kind of recipe, we shared it to the rest of the continent,
Yeah.
to the Africa CDC, and then we could see the rest of the continent really taking the whole world by storm,
Exactly.
discovering the beta variant, discovering the Omicron. So we felt it was a very proud moment, with my team, and then we went on. The good
Yeah.
thing is that for a long time, we didn't have, we were working on hundreds of samples every
Yeah.
day,
Yeah.
but for a long time, because of the strategy that we put in place, none of our staff actually had COVID. The first one that had COVID actually had gone home, to his community and then came back and brought it back to the lab. But eventually, we were able to contain that very quickly.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know. I don't even know what to say about this because I can see, it's not just about the 48 hours. It's about the work that was put in, before you actually got to sequence this, first the genome that you got from the person that was suspected to be having COVID. And, I think I like your analogy of making history or, perish. Either we make history together or we perish together. And, in this case, you all made history and we are, all very proud of you. And I think the other thing I've learned about from what you've shared is about the importance of speed and accuracy, especially when you're dealing with such a delicate scenario. And just thinking about all of this, Prof, and I know you also mentioned the challenges in terms of resources in Africa. And for you guys to be able to actually, even though you had the entire team there, what other sort of like resources did you have to pull together to be able to achieve this within the period of time that you were able to achieve for the SARS-CoV genome?
Well, I think one thing that you got to think about is when you don't have resources, you have to be creative.
Oh, wow.
Some
Okay.
some of the things that we did at the time, we didn't have all the resources in the world. But you think about maybe for testing, having PCR when people thought about, oh, we need a 50 microliter,
Yeah.
to do a PCR. But
Yeah.
we brought down PCR down to about 10 microliter. So it's
Mm,
just to tell you, for instance, that to do one simple reaction, we're doing 5 reactions for one reaction, where
mm,
things are going to be normally. So, and as an African lab, so because we didn't have resources, we created new ways of doing things and do things cheaper.
yeah.
These were basically things that we did, and then we're very sacrificial, to be honest with you. So, and when you hear all of my group and my team doing all of this, we're all doing this. We're not paid for doing this. We're just really sacrificial. We didn't think about, oh, what we would gain out of it. We didn't think about what we'll do out of. I mean, what we were just basically into it
Yeah.
to save lives.
Yeah.
We're into it to protect not only ourselves, but the people in the communities where we are, the country where we live in, the continent. So and
Yeah.
then make our own contribution globally. So I think really
Yeah.
that's what was driving us. The resource I think the most important resource was our courage. The most important resource was sacrifice that we put in.
Courage and sacrifice. Thank you so much for sharing that, Prof. And also just thinking about this, I know you were very instrumental in setting up the Institute of Genomics, the SGID, and just thinking about NGS technology and the kind of you know revolution that we are in right now. How do you think this is important, especially in cases where we have pandemics and emerging diseases, particularly for the continent?
Well, I think it's important for Africans to be at the frontiers of science. When I was, I can tell you that about 15 years ago, when I had the intention, I started talking about getting Africa ready for the genomic revolution. A lot
Mm,
of people told me that Africa wasn't ready, that
yeah.
even in 20 years, Africa will not be ready.
Mm,
Oh, you guys don't have water, you don't have constant power supply, you don't have water, you don't have this, you don't have the skills, you don't have the human resources. How many Africans are like you that understand NGS, can do NGS? So these are things that, I was being told. And I told them that, look, listen, and
yeah.
I remember all my colleagues and nobody ever believed that we could do it. Of
Mm,
course, you need courage and determination.
yeah.
And when I came back to Africa, it was a mindset to set up a genomic institution that would do genomic to respond to Africa problem,
Mm,
first infectious diseases. And
mm,
then we made that investment to set up the first NGS,
yeah.
in our setting. And
Yeah.
as we set up that first NGS in 2013, in 2014 we had a first test. So
Mm,
which is, Ebola emerged
yeah.
in West Africa. And that's when we actually showed the power of
Mm,
real-time genomic sequencing to respond to epidemics.
yeah.
So the world could see for the first time during an outbreak,
Yeah.
we introduced the whole framework, in 2014 that the
Yeah.
world used in
Yeah.
2020 to respond
Wow.
to COVID-19. That
Nice.
framework
Yeah.
was the first pillar of it was real-time genomic sequencing. How
Mm,
real-time genomic sequencing can help you to identify, characterize a virus and
yeah.
also help you to identify variants.
Yeah.
So we introduced that concept you
Yeah.
know Secondly, the second concept that we introduced was real-time, open data access and open data sharing, because we performed the first 99, sequencing of the first 99 Ebola virus and
Oh,
made it openly available to the global health community. That
wow.
was the first time where you could do genomic sequencing in real time. And I
Yeah.
remember I had to fight a lot of battle because organizations like the WHO, they were like, you are doing research during an outbreak. And I said, hey, listen, you were created in 1945. We
Mm,
can't use the knowledge of 1945 or your framework of 1945 to respond to epidemics now.
yeah.
Because at the time, what they used to do was to send experts in quote in Africa. They will
Mm,
come and then tell us whether they know well or not. They will tell you what to do.
helicopter.
Eventually, and then 2 years later, they will come back and then tell you, oh, what was responsible for that epidemic that you had 2 years ago was this virus.
Mm,
Meanwhile, they have sent sample to some lab in Europe, and then it takes time to do. But here, we are providing solution in real time. We're
mm,
saying it is the virus, it is this particular strain. This is how the virus is evolving. They have never seen anything like that.
yeah.
Then the third thing was the fact that we discovered a variant that was spreading much more faster than others. And we were trying to understand the reason. So we characterized the variant dysfunctional analysis, and that's how we discovered the concept of variants of concern, that you hear about during COVID. Then the
Yes.
fourth thing is the fact that we knew that it was going to be very difficult to control that epidemic if we kept just testing by PCR,
Yeah.
because it takes a long time. It was taking 72 hours and even 96 hours to do one test for somebody that was sick.
Yeah.
So we brought in the concept of translational genomics. That
Yeah.
is going from the genomic sequences that we have created
Yeah.
and then we translated that in the first rapid diagnostic test
Yeah.
that was approved by the WHO and then the USDA on the US FDA on the emergency use authorization. That
Yeah.
is, and that shows the concept of translational genomics. That's what gave the gap to the people in 2020, for instance.
Mm,
When you hear Moderna and everybody to
yes.
know, oh, this we can go from genomic sequencing to create a vaccine,
Yeah.
because these guys already showed us that we can go from genomic sequences to create diagnostic within 5 months.
Yeah.
So that we did.
Yeah.
So and then we also were building and training and building the capacity of young Africans.
Yeah.
So and you could see that all of that framework
Yeah.
that we put together, that's
Yeah.
what the world adopted in
Mm,
2020 when we were hit with COVID, right?
mm,
But
yeah.
at the base of all of that
Mm,
was next generation sequencing.
yeah.
If we did not dare to bring next generation sequencing and then help use that as a platform to actually do all of these things,
Mm,
that the situation in the world in 2020 would have been very, very different.
have
But the
been.
good thing is that we have demonstrated with that framework that we could use that as a way to transform epidemic response and
Yeah.
respond to an epidemic in a way that was never done before. And
Yeah.
then if you look at it in 2014, when this happened, we were doing all of this work in Sierra Leone and then, and prepare the world. But
Yeah.
then to show how powerful our approach to epidemic response
Yeah.
is when we had a first case in
Yeah.
Nigeria, for instance.
Yeah.
Unlike Sierra Leone or Guinea, where the sample, unlike Guinea, for instance, where the sample was sent to France and then they got a result about a month later while the disease was transmitting.
Yeah.
In Nigeria, when when they had a first suspected case, the sample was sent to a lab
Yeah.
within hours.
Yeah.
Within hours. Again, that brings you to the concept of speed and accuracy.
Yes.
Within hours, we knew we had Ebola in the country, in Nigeria.
You're right.
And we informed public health authorities. And we also start integrating our testing, our sequencing with the public health response.
Yeah.
And that's how, in the background, quietly, we're using data to inform public health response in Nigeria in
Mm,
a very powerful way, establishing transmission chain. Who get the disease to who, then we need to block this place. Who get the disease, we need to isolate this place. So that's exactly what we did.
mm,
And you could see a country like Nigeria,
mm,
230 million people.
mm.
With a virus that emerged in a place like Lagos, 25 million people,
Mm.
beating that epidemic in 93 days with
Wow.
only 20 cases and
Wow.
8 deaths. That's how
That's massive.
Nigeria got
Yeah.
into the annals of public health positively because of the technology and the innovation that we actually brought into the scene.
Wow, wow. That's actually very impressive. And Prof, I'm just from everything you're sharing, I'm just, thinking and imagining that you've been working with, a large group of team and collaborators to be able to, pull this. Is it, possible or okay for you to also share about that aspect of science and the importance of like working with people and being able to build trust so that people can actually trust you with, conducting research, especially in the continent?
Yeah, I do think that, for instance, collaboration and then trust is important. All the story I'm talking about now,
Mm,
again, I will tell you that I was talking about wasn't done by me alone. I had a lot of, as I said before, a lot of people in my lab. I give
yes.
them a full credit for all the work that they did. So
Yeah.
I think I usually say I'm just a figurehead because they do all of the work,
Yeah.
and then, but I always give them credit.
Yeah.
But then I also have some very strong collaborators and
Yeah.
partners who strongly believe, in the work, we shared vision in the work that we're doing. One of them participated, I call him, we call ourselves our better academic half. So
Yeah.
we're like husband and wife when it comes to the field of research. We just believe in each other.
Yeah.
And I just want, without that collaboration, because as we're in the middle of a storm, they
Yeah.
provide us with strong support. I can tell you, for instance, that during COVID, if you can imagine when supply chain is so disrupted,
Yeah.
either during Ebola or during COVID,
Yes.
you ask yourself the question, how do I supply the lab with all the disruption in supply
Yes.
chain?
Yes.
So, and all what happened often is she will send people from her lab. You can imagine somebody leaving the US with about 10 suitcases of supplies and things, get to
Wow.
Lagos airport, just release the suitcases to my team, and
Yeah.
take the same flight that brought in from the US
Wow.
back to the US. So
Wow.
imagine my team flying over to Boston to
Mhm.
just go and get boxes that are ready. They get there the same day, they get the suitcases, and then take the next flight back to Nigeria. So you
Yeah.
are exchanging protocol, looking at data together, think about how we can improve things. So I think collaboration becomes very important. And
Yeah.
then that can only happen where there is what you call trust.
Yeah.
And trust is very important.
Yeah.
When people trust you, they can give you anything. And
Mhm.
one of those things is, for instance, when we, for instance, do the work and collaborating with countries across the continent, I can tell you that there's out of 54 countries in Africa, we've trained people in 53. We have we have sequencing 54 sequences sample in 48 of the 53 African countries. But the thing about it is trust, because as we help sequence the data, we give
Yeah.
the data and we give the data back to the countries because they own the data. So
Yeah.
we don't take it. We don't use it for publication. We don't use it for, the difference is that
Yes.
when people trust you, they can give you everything.
Wow.
And they can call you upon to help at each point in time. That is really trust. And trust is very key, to collaboration. And collaboration is also very important in order to solve problems. You can't, as a single place, know
Mm,
it all and have all the solutions. You
mm,
need to work with others. Everybody needs to make input. So and
mm.
that for us is very key. And
Yeah.
the power of collaboration can actually take the continent of Africa very far. You
Yeah.
could see, as I said, as we collaborated, shared protocol during COVID, you could see Africans coming together, responding in an incredible way to COVID-19.
Yeah.
Recently, again, to illustrate the power of collaboration, when Rwanda had its own case of Marburg, when they had their first cases of Marburg, because of the experience that we have in this space, they
Yeah.
invited us. We
Yeah.
sent our team down there. They were working with the Rwandese. They're brothers and sisters, and they
Mhm.
all work together as one single team. I mean, they work together as a one single team. And guess what? They were also doing the same thing that we did before, near real-time genomic sequencing,
Yeah.
working, establishing transmission chain. And guess what? Rwanda really did something that was incredible.
Mm.
They contained an outbreak of Marburg in a city like Kigali, and
Wow.
with a case fatality rate of 20%.
Yeah.
This has never happened.
Yeah.
Marburg outbreaks everywhere, and in the history
Yeah.
of mankind, I've always had a case fatality rate that is 80% and above.
Wow.
So
Wow.
that was incredible to
Yes.
see that collaboration. But
Yes.
again, to prove the point where we actually package the story and
Mm.
put that in nature,
Yes.
we didn't say, oh no, the Rwandese were the lead authors, the Rwandese were the senior authors, the
Yeah.
Rwandese were the corresponding authors.
Yeah.
It's just to say that, because they trusted us, and
Yeah.
then they also know that they own the information, they own the data. We are not into it because we want to control. And
Yeah.
that's when people know that you're into it because you want to give and not control, then there's that element of trust.
Trust, yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. So just, to recap, so there's collaboration and trust, sorry. And you've talked about speed and accuracy, you've talked about courage, sacrifice, and determination. And, is there any other aspect you'd like to add, especially for the young scientists? Because I know you also mentioned about building capacity. Something that you could tell a young scientist who is very interested in making, global impact while rooted in solving local challenges.
Well, you got to be very focused. I think the problem with our local scientists at times is that they don't have the focus. You need to know what you want. What exactly do you want? You cannot be in Africa, say you want to solve the problems of Africa and your mind is in Manchester. It
Yeah.
can work. Your colleagues in Manchester are sending you nice pictures and then you are fascinated by them. So that is a source of distraction.
Yeah.
So I mean, you gotta, it's obvious. You need to collaborate. You need to go
Yes.
out there and learn. You need to go and get skills and bring back. But you
Yeah.
really need to know what you want in life. So it's about if you are grounded and rooted in Africa. So
Yeah.
yes, go out and then acquire skill and knowledge. Bring
Yeah.
the skill and knowledge back and apply. But you
Yeah.
cannot be 100%. Your mind is 100% outside, and then
Yeah.
you're on the African continent, and you think you're going to make any inroad. No, you have to be very dogged and then believe in the setting where you are. because it's actually by being and believing in your setting that you observe problems in your community, observe issues in your environment, and start thinking about providing responses. If your mind is divided, because people keep finding how I said, look, it's because your attention is divided. You
Yes.
cannot be here and then at the same time it's like, oh, I'm planning, maybe I need to go to San Francisco, I need to fly out of this country, this country is too hard. Once you're in that mindset,
Yes.
you will never even see the problem, talk less of providing solution. But
Yeah.
if you're in the mindset that, look, you know what, I'm going to address the problems of this country and then support the world from
Yeah.
here, you
Yeah.
will see that things will work.
Yeah.
So I think the young people need to understand that Africa is actually a place where there's so much opportunity, especially
Mhm.
for research,
Mm.
that if they focus and then take up those challenges,
Yeah.
then they will actually, become what I call global stars,
Wow.
because that's where the problems are.
Yes.
I can say one thing is that the global north is super saturated. There's
Mm.
just it's saturated. The place where we still need to make discoveries, where you still need to make contribution to health, is in Africa, because that's a place that is the least explored in the world.
Yes.
Why
Yeah.
wouldn't young African take that opportunity and
Mm.
then start exploring and start providing solutions and start, giving the world what they need?
Mm.
I just imagine myself if I stayed at Harvard. I'm not sure that from Harvard I would have done all those contributions
Mm.
that we did. So it's because we made that that intentional
Mm.
return to the continent with a mindset that we're going to go and solve the problem.
Yeah.
We have now created a platform
Yeah.
that enabled young Africans to do all the work in Africa. At my own time, it was so difficult. You couldn't do
Yeah.
sequencing. You have to think about going outside to do sequencing. But now, on
Yeah.
the continent of Africa, you have the most performant genomic sequencing platforms. So, is there any need to go out there to learn? You got everything there. So it
Yeah.
becomes cost effective for you to learn, and it becomes faster for you to apply the skills, and
Mhm.
then learn in an environment that is similar to yours, that makes you to enable you to make progress very fast. Then,
Mm.
secondly, the thing I want to tell them is that they need to look for resources, financial resources. All of the things I'm talking about require money. So
Mm.
we have to be very intentional about looking for resources. There are
Yeah.
grants, there are foundations that actually provide resources for people to do research in places like Africa. So we
Yeah.
have to be intentional. We don't have to sit back and wait for our government. I'm not saying that our government should act responsibly. They
Yes.
should act responsibly by putting money where their mouth are, but
Yeah.
let's go out and bring extra resources to do the work in a way that we can be very competitive.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree with you. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I'm gonna take a break here, Prof, and just ask the audience if you have questions for Prof. I'm checking YouTube now, and also Nehemiah can let me know. Just type it in the chat so Prof can answer it. While we still have time, we have about 18 minutes. So the earlier you type, the faster for Prof to answer your questions. So start typing now, because I realize that a lot of times people start typing their questions when we are almost winding up the session, so it becomes difficult. So yeah, try to ask it now. All right. So while still waiting for questions, because I can't see any right now, just comments. Yeah. So Prof, you've won numerous awards, you've had so many recognitions. What would you say is the award or accolade that, has, I don't know whether I should put it as like you feel is most impactful to you, or you would term as your highest accolade so far?
Well, I will think that um, maybe the highest accolade that I've gotten so far is actually the global recognition that we just got
Mm.
to being listed as by Time Magazine as 100 most influential people in the world for 2025. It means that our work is resonating. It means that the
Mm.
world acknowledges the work that we've done, and that for me, I think is important. And the most important thing is that it shows that from Africa you could
Yeah.
impact the world. So and
Exactly. Yeah.
exactly. So I think that for me is a most important, because it's conveying one message
Yeah.
that from Africa we could transform the world, and
Mm.
then that from Africa the innovations in Africa can be recognized as innovations, and
Mm.
then the impact of the work that we do in Africa at
Mm.
least are translated into global impact.
Mm.
So and that for me, I think it's very humbling
Yeah.
to see the world recognizing science in Africa as science that is worthwhile. I mean, to find yourself in that list, to be like the only scientist
Yeah.
in 100, among the 100 most influential people in the world, for me is very humbling, because it's easy for an artist,
Yes.
with a
Yes.
big bang song,
Yeah.
to have that huge influence. It's easy
Yes.
for a politician.
Yes.
We're on that same list with people like Donald Trump,
Yes.
in 2025. So people that have money, rich people like Elon Musk, yeah, we're on the same list with Elon Musk and others. Big sport people like Serena Williams, and then and others. So that for them, they've gone to Olympics, they
Yes.
won Grand Slams.
Yeah.
I mean, it's clear
Yeah.
that for those categories, and people that have money, people in the stock market, politicians, it's easy. But for scientists to appear in that list of 100 most influential people in the world, it's very difficult. It's
Yes.
it's like it's like mission almost impossible. But
Yes.
then for us, we're really surprised and shocked to be, to see ourselves on that list. I think for me, it's the strongest thing, the message for me, is not about me, but the
Yeah.
strongest message here is that, African science and innovation is being recognized globally, and then that gives hope to the fact that, for young Africans, that, what, keep doing what you're doing and then do it well, and then your work will be recognized
I love that. Keep doing what you're doing and do it well, and your work will be recognized globally, not just like locally,
globally. That's true.
globally. Yeah. All right. Thank you for sharing that. And just looking into the future, and just speaking about, the current projects that you're working on, what are you most excited about?
One thing I'm very excited about is the fact that we just started work in the space of human genomics, and that I'm very excited.
Yeah.
I'm always somebody that people say, look, you break new ground wherever you go, and I'm just excited that we've
Yeah.
did a lot of innovation for malaria, for viral hemorrhagic disease, and epidemic response and outbreak response, to
Yeah.
epidemic and pandemic. We've broken new grounds there, and then showed how you could use it to contain. But now we're venturing into something that is relatively new, where African, that don't have experience, where the data are even for Africa are not available.
Yeah.
I mean, Africa human genomics is something that is a new thing that we're getting into. You know
Mm.
that, I mean, in the global database, Africa has just about 1% of the sequences are from Africa.
Yeah.
And the way the world is moving, we're moving into the space of precision and personalized medicine.
Mm.
And we believe that, with the new project that we're getting into, we want to sequence millions of African genomes.
Wow.
And with sequencing those millions of African genomes, we're going to be establishing reference
Mm.
genomes for Africans,
Yeah.
many populations in Africa. We're
Yeah.
going to be establishing, discovering markers for the diagnostics, and
Yes.
then also discovering things related to therapeutics,
Yeah.
monoclonals, and then actually produce, I mean, think about generating enough knowledge that can accelerate vaccines for many communicable and non-communicable diseases in Africa.
Yeah.
So I think for us is actually pushing Africa in the front line
Yeah.
of discovery and innovation. I
Yeah.
always tell people that genomics is the greatest equalizer. I
Yes.
believe so much in the power of genomics, because
Yeah.
we may not in Africa need 400 years,
Mm.
in terms of health development to meet up America or overtake America or China. I believe Africa is going to overtake the rest of the world when it comes to that. If we are intentional, if we
Yes.
put in the resources, and if the young people in Africa put their
Yes.
mind into this new field that I'm talking about,
Yeah.
looking into human genomics, then there's a huge potential here to use the genomic data to
Yeah.
actually start bringing to the fore precision and personalized medicine. Think
Yeah.
about pharmacogenomics.
Yeah.
So how you could actually prescribe medicine based on the DNA of the person,
Yeah.
reducing, side effects and everything. That's really the way we are going.
Yeah.
How we could actually just, developing medicine like
Yeah.
for cancer that are actually meant for African genetic makeup. So
Yes.
instead of doing it haphazardly,
Yes.
think about, kidney diseases, cardiovascular diseases,
Yes.
the power behind it, where young Africans can create, new molecules,
Yes.
to cure those diseases. And
Yeah.
then remember, that Africa DNA is a mother of the is a mother of all DNAs. So as you resolve the problems in Africa, then you are
Yes.
by extension resolving the problem globally. So that is a unique opportunity that the young Africans have actually to take over, the ownership and the leadership of science globally.
Yeah, and I totally agree, Prof. And I'm actually very excited about us coming up with like an African biobank because we have biobanks everywhere except in Africa. So we need one massive biobank that can, help us address all of these challenges. And I'm actually very excited about that. As someone who's a data scientist, I'm very excited about that aspect as well. So I'm gonna read a few comments from the chat for you. So Peter says, "Hi, Prof. Congratulations on your recent award. What can African governments do to encourage reverse brain drain that would bring African-born scientists back home?"
Yeah, I think that first of all, first and foremost is when you talk about governments in Africa, government in Africa is all of us. So government in Africa is not a few politicians that are out there.
Yeah,
So the question is, we need to be intentional as Africans, first of all, to determine, I mean, to decide we want to come back home.
yeah,
If we're expecting government to solve all the problems, we'll never, there's nowhere in the world where government actually solve all the problems.
yeah,
Citizens decide to address problems and government encourage them along the line.
yeah,
So it is clear that, the young Africans in the diaspora, if you want to solve problems and address problems and you want to encourage others to come back, make
yeah.
that bold step.
To
Some
come.
of us made that, yes, some of us made that bold move. And
Yeah,
of course, along the line, we got government support.
yeah,
So just to give you an example, so I work in a private university in Nigeria, that isn't even government-owned institution. But
yeah.
because of the work that we were doing, the work that we do, the Nigerian government,
Mm,
through the World Bank scheme,
mm.
borrows money from the World Bank and then give the money to us to do the work
Wow,
that we're doing. So
wow.
it's just to give you, and then this happens in many institutions across, the
Yeah.
World Bank scheme. Many African countries don't talk about that. The
Yes.
World Bank, I mean, through the World Bank, African governments
Yeah.
totally have borrowed billions of dollars to support higher education and
Mm,
to establish centers of excellence.
yeah.
But we tend not to talk about it. We tend to talk more about the little grants that we receive from countries. The European Union will give us 10 million, we'll blow it up. But we
Yeah.
tend to forget the fact that our governments have invested
Mm,
billions of dollars,
mm,
to support research. But
yeah.
and the reason is because as young African in the diaspora,
Yeah.
we are not intentional about coming back. We are very happy living in the comfort zone where we are. You
Mm,
need to come back and get your hands dirty. Do
yes.
the work and then make an impact, and you're going to see your government one
Yes.
way or the other.
Yes.
Maybe not to the level that we want, but
Yeah.
then they will support you. You
Yeah.
see, the reality is the fact that they may not give you money directly, but the
Mm,
government will stand up as your guarantor, for
yes.
instance. A lot
Yes.
of the time when I'm applying for grants,
Yes.
I ask for the Ministry of Health, for
Yeah.
instance, to
Yeah.
give me a lot of support.
Yeah.
When a minister takes his pen and write and say, that they are backing you, they are giving you all the support, they will facilitate this and that, and
Mm,
then you attach that to your grant, it's a lot. That is government support.
mm,
Government support does not always translate into cash, but
mm,
there are a lot of things that they do to support you.
yeah.
Your institution, for instance,
Yeah.
will support you, provide you with the space to do some work.
Yeah.
Remember the difference between the kind of facility and administrative fee that you pay in Africa.
Yeah.
In America, for instance, some institution will take up to 97%. You
Mm,
can imagine that you're getting a grant and then 97% of that goes,
the-
to facilitate your work and everything.
yeah.
In Africa, it's about 8%. Think
Mm,
about that difference. The differential that you are seeing between 97 and 8%.
8%, yeah.
Who is bearing that cost?
Mm,
Your institution is bearing the cost. These
mm,
are contributions that we tend not to value. So
yeah.
I think, make that bold step of coming back. If you
Yes.
had a critical mass on the continent, we will change things around in little or no time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I hope all young scientists have heard what Prof has said. Be intentional about going back home. If you are planning to make a difference in Africa, you have to change your mindset and first start by going home. Right. So a few people are asking when you're writing a book. um, based on the journey and the story that you've shared. And I actually agree. A book would be very, like an autobiography. Yeah, would make a lot of sense. So yeah, I don't know whether you're thinking about that.
Maybe you and I should take that. Maybe you and I should take that offline and discuss, because I know you have the you could do it.
Oh,
So
okay. Okay.
I think you and I can take that offline and then discuss and then maybe write that book. I may not have the time and the
Yeah,
everything. But let's figure it out as a project.
absolutely. Let's do it. I'll
Mhm.
reach out separately. So there's another question. How Okay, so someone is asking whether you have PhD programs in genomics for young African scientists to
Yes,
take.
there is a PhD program that is internationally accredited
Okay.
in my institution. So we meet up all European standards. So we have that accreditation by AQS. So we have
Mm,
a master's and a PhD program that is internationally accredited.
all right, all right. So Abby, I hope you've heard that and you can check up the website. George is asking, how do you suggest we achieve all that if we depend heavily on imported technology to do all the research, which is very expensive? I think Prof has like elaborated a lot on how we can achieve
No, but
this.
not all technologies are important. Listen, there are a few things that you can do even within your lab. Let me tell you, a few years ago when I was a young scientist, I used to produce Taq polymers in my lab.
Mm,
You don't have to. Taq polymerase is something that if you get a bacteria that has Taq, you can grow the bacteria and then
yeah,
just, lyse and then centrifuge, spin, and then the supernatant is your Taq, and then you can use it. You are doing it for research. You're not doing it to sell or to anything that you meet some super, super high standard. There are
yeah,
some basic things that you can produce. There are things that we can do in terms of, some little things that you can do by just doing some little innovation. So, like think about, distilled water. You could distill water in a very quick way. You don't have to import distilled water. There are just too many things that we can do locally. Yes,
yeah,
I agree that, in terms of plastic wares and everything,
yeah,
we are importing, but that is changing. You
yeah,
are you started seeing some companies in Africa daring venture into that space where they are making some plastics and everything.
yeah.
That definitely will change over time.
Yeah. All right. And I think David is speaking about the reference panel. I think we've covered that. It's actually one of the biggest challenge. I think it's a comment that the reference panel is one of the biggest challenges for human genomics in Africa. Kevin says, well said, Prof. You've truly inspired young scientists, especially young African scientists, to believe that they can make a global impact while focusing on solving Africans' own challenges. And then, but Nyam is saying, hi, Prof. Congratulations. Too often in Africa, senior scientists do not grant young researchers the opportunities they need to explore and innovate. How can we navigate this challenge?
I don't think so. I think I see a lot of change in the landscape. I give you the insight, not only myself, but if you go to labs in South Africa, to Ghana, in Mali, and everything, I've seen a lot of young African leading papers. This wasn't the culture at the time when I was a graduate student. So
Mm,
you need to understand that these days, many groups in Africa, when they do research, you see who is the first author. It's often a student.
mm,
And then the scientist is there. And then in many groups that I see in Africa, young students do have small projects,
yeah,
the Royal Society of Tropical Medicine, all of those, they are small, small projects that are being encouraged. I see a lot of young scientists when I go to meetings,
yeah,
American Society of Tropical Medicine, a lot of them being present because they are presenting data from their lab. They got fellowship to attend the meetings. You can get those fellowship without the support of your mentors. I think in many, many places, the young scientists are very, very much supported. I take the case of my lab, they are highly supported. They are very mobile because we gave them the opportunity to go around, to
yeah,
learn, to present, and to
yeah,
do a lot of things. I think the mindset and the culture is changing. I would encourage you to um, to look for a mentor on the continent. That is just the truth. The mentor is not necessarily somebody that will be in your institution. Look
mm,
for somebody around that can encourage you, that can provide you the opportunities and everything. So
yeah.
mentorship is all about that.
Yeah, I love that your mentor doesn't have to be in your own institution. They could be anywhere else. So yeah, I hope you can take that up. And this one doesn't have a name, but says, sorry, I joined late, but what are the key skills gaps within the research community?
I would say one of the major skill gap that I see now on the continent is what I call the soft skills. So,
Mm,
there's a huge gap in terms of analytical skills, data science,
yeah,
machine learning,
yeah,
things like artificial intelligence and then bioinformatics. So those are the skills that I think like huge gaps, and then also the ability to perform things like next generation sequencing.
yeah,
These are things that we need to try as much as possible to fill.
yeah, yeah. And Prof, you mentioned soft skills as well. Could you elaborate on this aspect as well?
Yeah, I do think that, when I talk about soft skills, so it's really not necessarily, what I think about, computer-aided design. Think about, even the ability to communicate your science, science communications. All of those things are very important. And we tend not to have some of those skills,
Yeah.
and then that come to complement the science that you're doing. I think even artistic skills are very, very important these days in science. So these are some of the areas where we need to really invest and encourage young people to come. So the world is no longer like, as a scientist, you think you can do everything. Young people in the field of art should be encouraged to work with scientists these days to illustrate, the mindset, and then illustrate science in a way that is completely different.
Yeah. Right. And Prof, I know there's a lot of capacity building that is also happening in the continent, particularly I'm as a bioinformatician, I know particularly in the area of bioinformatics and data science. But there are other avenues that you think could be also explored as well in terms of capacity building in the continent?
Well, I mean, the one thing that I started doing in my lab is actually to start building the skill set in terms of virtual reality.
Mm,
We have a virtual reality lab, so where you provide young scientists with the VR experience. Think
mm,
about somebody who's trying to work in a disease, let's say malaria or Ebola or Lassa or any cardiovascular disease, or somebody trying to study biology or somebody trying to study medicine. They
mm,
are studying anatomy. The
mm,
person, if he has a VR experience, or
mm.
you want to go into a lab, you want to study something, you
Yeah,
realize that you go into VR, you explore that thing there, you leave that thing there, you perform those experiences virtually, and
yeah,
then you go to the lab. It's actually much more easy,
yeah,
right? And that's the way I think that we need to start doing science in Africa. Let's not do it the way I did, study biology the way I studied. So I
yeah,
think, and even biochemistry the way I studied biochemistry, or design experiment, the way we used to design experiment.
yeah,
Can we start bringing VR or alternative reality or
yeah,
mixed reality into the scheme of things, so
yeah,
that we can leverage those to actually fasten the speed up the
yeah,
processes. Think about somebody trying to learn next generation sequencing,
yeah,
finding himself in a lab
yeah,
where you first of all go and do VR.
yeah,
Within 2 hours, you
yeah,
already perform those
yeah,
experience. I mean,
yeah,
those experiments. When
yeah,
you are going into the lab, then you virtually have seen everything.
yes,
Nothing is new or strange. You performed this and you understood them. Even if
yeah,
it took a few days to do that,
yeah,
it's unlike the type of training that you go and then they show you how to do. It takes months to do. You could
yeah,
actually turn months into a week,
yes.
and then you become the expert. So it's a bit of that we're doing in our lab now in order to change the way, revolutionize the way we do training and capacity building.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense because if you can visualize and imagine what you're gonna be easier to actually do it, you know, present or physically. And I know, Prof, we've talked about the people, we've talked about, the importance of collaborations, and you also touched on government. But could you please elaborate on how institutions and communities can further support research that drives real world impact in the continent? So thinking
And
about, yeah,
I think that even as scientists, we often fail to engage our institutions to let them
yeah,
see the value of the work that we do. We
yeah.
often fail also to engage our communities to see how relevant and important, their contribution to science through their involvement, could be. When you are able to convince your community, you're able to convince starting with,
Mm,
your team, starting and then your institution, then the community around you, and then even people involved in making policies, when they
mm,
understand the value of what you do, then you get the support that you need.
mm,
Because and then also it's very important for us to actually produce what I call use cases. That is, make work that make, I mean, do work that make an impact. So it's not actually for publication purpose. So
mm,
let people know that you are doing the work not for publication because you're interested in growing academically. That's not your priority. Your
mm.
priority should be to do work in order to actually impact.
Yeah,
So if I give you the instance, we
yeah,
did all of the work that we did in COVID. We
yes,
didn't publish our COVID paper.
yeah,
Data from our lab, sequencing tens of thousands of genomes.
yeah.
We published our own paper, our COVID paper, out in 2023. So
Wow.
all of the time, we're busy providing information
Yes.
that was very relevant and
Mm,
very helpful for public health.
mm,
Really we're not interested in making sure we publish or
yeah,
that we have to publish, but we're very interested in ensuring that the people can get the data to make the policies and making the necessary intervention. When people see you in that light, then they understand you, then your community understand you, they understand you are not exploitative, They understand you're into this business because you want to give what you want to give.
That's very true. That's very true because then even for you to get this data, you have to go to the communities, and for them to actually allow you to be able to conduct the research, they have to trust you. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. And yeah, I think we are at the top of the hour, actually 4 minutes after. Yeah. So I hope no one else has a question for Prof, and we can wrap up here. So Prof, just to wrap it up, maybe you could share, summary or takeaways, or something else that you'd want to add for the aspiring young scientists that are looking forward to making global impact. What would be your final remarks for them?
I will tell them to believe in their dreams, believe in themselves, and then let nobody tell them that anything is impossible. I've
Mm,
come to realize that if you set your mind into doing something, there will be nothing, there will be no limiting factor. Nothing will stop you. Nothing, I mean, if even when they tell you, that something is impossible, that should be more catalytic. For
yeah.
those that know me, is that it is when you tell me that something is impossible, you don't know that you're energizing me and you're catalyzing me to actually go and do that. Try to do that thing that you think is impossible.
Yeah.
Dream big.
Yes.
My thing is always dream big,
Yes.
and then follow your dream,
Yeah.
with passion. So
Yeah.
if you follow your dream with passion and you have big dreams and big vision,
Yeah.
you will eventually achieve those dreams
Yeah.
because you are passionate, you are determined. Let nobody tell you that there's nothing you cannot do. You
Yeah.
can do anything because God has created us to be, to be winners.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. What a note to end in. Dream big and nothing is impossible. Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you for all your insights, for sharing your journey with us, and just for being here with us today. We really appreciate. And with that, I would like to, call it a day or an evening or a morning from wherever you're joining us from. Thank you all for joining the live session for my science journey. This session is available on YouTube. It's gonna, be available later on, so you can come back. And if you joined late, you can also get to view it later on. But with that, see you on the next My Science Journey episode, and enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, and night, wherever you are. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.